All right, welcome. Today we're talking to Regina Guerra. And Regina, you have a wonderful startup that hasn't quite rolled out yet, but it's insanely interesting from so many different perspectives. Mainly because a lot of what we do in class, especially, is we talk about being socially responsible. We talk about this thing called ESG. And your idea just hits on so many different levels that like to not talk to you would be a gross misuse of our time. So, welcome, Regina.
Thank you.
Um, if you could first tell us the name of your company and tell us a little bit about what you do.
hmm So my company is called Be the Earth, and it is in the emerging industry of green death care using a process called natural organic reduction, also known as body composting.
Body composting. Okay, so this would be part of the green burial category, I guess you would consider
Right. So
it?
currently, consumers have actually really limited options in death care. So you can be buried in a cemetery. That takes up land, and depending on if you're embalmed or in a casket, you're also putting things into the earth and it ties up land in perpetuity.
Mhm.
Uh, there is green burial that also requires a green cemetery, ties up land in perpetuity. So it's not really sustainable in
Mhm.
terms of a long-term solution. A lot of people think cremation is the green option in burial, but actually, cremation puts like a metric ton of carbon dioxide into the air. It's something like the equivalent of a 500-mile road trip
Hmm.
in the amount of fossil fuels that are burned for each cremation. So there's not really a good option when it comes to death care. And so recently, California legalized a new option called natural organic reduction or body composting, where your body is gently transformed into compost that can then be returned to the land. You can be the earth.
Love that. Be the earth.
Be the
So,
earth.
so a purely green option to how people exit this mortar coil. Uh,
Mhm.
and I love that. Where did this idea come from? From where did you derive?
Yeah. Yeah. So about 10 years ago, I had a friend who was in mortuary school, and she introduced me to the idea of green death care. And at that time, it really was just green burial. And I found it really fascinating because it's an area of life that we don't often think about. Obviously, people avoid thinking about it, but it's really lacking in a good green option. It's sort of one of the last few industries to have that green focus.
Mhm.
And so I've just like followed the movement over the years and just kept track of the recent, developments and research and all that. And then I think about like in 2021 or somewhere around there during the pandemic, Washington was the first state to legalize natural organic reduction. And then Oregon, Colorado, Vermont, California passed legislation where it's legalized, but it can't start to be offered in California until 2027.
Mhm.
And then since then, I've watched this idea grow into a
Mhm.
movement
Mhm.
where now it's really spreading all across the country, and people are actually becoming more aware of the fact that when it comes to death care, there's just not great options out there.
Mm. So this is not legal currently in California, but it will be because of legislation that was passed in 2027.
Right.
So, well, why didn't you just wait till 2027?
Well, there's things that have to happen. So all of the providers, and there are like you could count them on one hand, how many people are actually doing this. Each person has to develop their own proprietary compost recipe. You have to create all of the composting takes place in a vessel. So you have to, do that sort of R&D work that has to happen. In addition, I think actually what's more important than all of that is just getting information out there to consumers because, I think it's a little bit of a generational thing, but when I talk to people my age or younger, like every decision in their life, they have this sort of like climate change lens that they view it through. And so if something isn't up to that standard, it's like, well, that's not going to work for me. I'm going to need something else. And so I think for me, the most important part of how I'm going to spend the next few years is not only doing that research and development, but also just getting information out there to people and getting people talking about it.
Mm. Love that. So the reason you didn't wait till 2027 is because there's plenty of work to do to stand
Plenty.
up. Plenty of work to do.
Yeah.
So you would be a strong you would give a strong recommendation to taking your time and planning before you roll out your project and your venture.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm a planner.
yeah, yeah,
That's just my
yeah.
nature. And something like this, because it's such like a sensitive part of our
Mm,
life, it's
mm,
really not something that, I want to like go big and then, not be able to deliver on promises because this
yeah.
is this is someone's loved one that we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So, one of the things that is also really, really interesting about your venture is that it's a disintermediary, meaning you've taken out this middleman
Mhm.
that we typically would consider an integral part of the process, in this case, dying, and that middle person would be, I suppose, the funeral home and the funeral director. It reminds me of a company called Uber that
Mhm.
took the taxi cab company and they disintermediated them. They've just taken them out of the mix so that you can deal directly with the driver. Um, do you find that those kind of correlations are daunting because you're really taking on an industry? You're you're doing so much, but one of them is taking on an industry, and you're really kind of up against them. I wonder how that sort of plays into your plan.
I actually see it more as an opportunity because in order for this to be an option for people, I mean, we each could, go through and like reinvent the wheel each time, but I actually want to partner with existing funeral homes and say, hey, you don't need to go through all of this R&D work and educating the public and doing all this outreach. You could have this on your menu of options and contract with me. And in that way, it's really a, I don't want to say win-win because we're talking about, a situation that's like very sensitive for people. But in that way, the consumer can have what they want. And also the funeral home can do the thing that they do best, which is working with the families, which is planning the memorials, which is helping them navigate like all of the like paperwork that has to happen. So there's an element of disruption to it, but I actually think it's an opportunity for funeral homes as well.
I love that. So you're really appealing to some very new requirements for new generations. One of which you said is it has to be sustainable. It has to be good for the planet,
Mhm.
good for climate, but also that we work strategically in an alliance format. So rather than, I love that. Rather than like taking on the industry, you want to partner with them, and also a really good sort of tenet for the future, which is building alliances rather than being aggressively competitive. I
And
love that.
that's just my nature.
Yeah, I
I
love
have
that.
to say, like, I look for opportunities for
Mhm,
collaboration
mhm,
more than, I think about that kind of like maybe stereotypical business person,
mhm.
that's really out to like climb to the top of the hill.
Yeah. Which leads me to another question, thank you, which is you're not really a business person at heart. You have another job, another career,
Mhm.
and you haven't given that up. You've throughout the process of planning this and testing it and doing all the things you're doing, you've retained your, as we say, your day gig.
Mhm.
And also a sign of really successful entrepreneurs is that they've built this little buffer as they plan, and they haven't given up their day gig. They haven't. It doesn't add to the stresses of paying the bills right away, but instead it allows you this little sort of level of comfort to be able to spend time building your venture before you perhaps jettison from your day gig. What exactly is your day job?
So I'm a teacher at Santa Rosa Junior College. Mhm.
Excellent. And you actively still are doing that.
And I'm actively still doing that. And yeah, I think again, I'm a planner. I want to be
Mhm,
really thoughtful every step of the way. And
mhm.
so I don't want to back myself into a corner where I start making decisions out of a place of anything other than what is the absolute best way for me to build this business.
Love that. We talk a lot in our classes about differentiation. and the market for everything is really, really crowded. You could pick any category of good service that exists, and there's so many players. And the ones that truly succeed, the ones that sort of make their way to the top, are the ones that have a significant point of differentiation. Can you just touch on how you approach differentiation in the work that you're doing?
Um, well, I think it just speaks to people at a level that it's so interesting because part of the work of building this business, I've been connecting with a lot of different like trade organizations,
Mhm.
and there's different groups. There's the funeral industry. Yes. There's also composting people who are kind of amazing and are out there trying to
Yeah.
save the world
Mm.
by composting other things. And I think that when people hear about this, it's so fascinating that it opens up the conversation about, well, what do I want for when I die? Or what do I and that's just something that's been a little taboo, I think, in our society. And this actually is something that, for whatever reason, it kind of resonates with people where they can talk about death in, not a positive way, but in a way where they can think about, like, yeah, like, how do I want to think about this? And so the logo for my business is actually a tree, because everyone I talk to says, I want to be a tree.
Yeah, yeah.
And me too. I want to be a tree, after I die. And so I think what's interesting is that it's such a unique thing. And even if you don't compost, most people have kind of a basic understanding of what composting is.
Mhm.
And it just is, I don't know, it resonates really deeply with people in a way that they want to feel like a connection, back to the earth.
Love that. What a great project. You're bringing attention to something that most people don't even think about or plan.
Mm,
And you're doing it in a way that is socially responsible. It's great for the earth. It's great for natural resources, no matter how large the planet gets. This doesn't impact that like
mm.
cemeteries do, or headstones and giant marble mausoleums. It's fantastic. I'm a fan, by the way. I don't know if you can tell.
Thanks. Yes.
And while you're doing this, have there been any specific challenges, any specific things along the way that have that you didn't maybe plan on, that you've had to really kind of focus on to get past?
Well, so obviously I'm a teacher, so I'm not in the funeral industry. And so I think it's been interesting to learn about the language. And when I was creating the branding for my business and thinking about how I want to communicate with people about this, it's a sensitive topic. And so I've really had to learn how to speak in a way that is open and clear, while also understanding that, for some people, it's just not a topic that they even want to engage with.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that kind of branding work, I think, has been challenging, but also really fun in the way that it's challenging.
Yeah, so like getting people to just sort of wrap their heads around a topic that they otherwise wouldn't have considered.
Right.
Interesting.
Uh,
Well, this has been fascinating. I really thank you for taking the time. Before you go, is
yes.
there anything that you can leave our business students with? Any sage advice, any words of wisdom,
Yes.
anything at all that would help them?
For me, the biggest, best thing was just making connections.
Mm,
So I took the venture launch class. I connected with the SBDC, who had amazing free, information and resources. I connected with trade industries. I went to conferences. I
mm,
attend trainings. I've connected, like I said, with the funeral industry people, with people doing natural organic reduction, and with people doing composting.
mhm.
And just being part of all of those worlds, you're out there, you're learning about how other people see things, and then you're the one that's like connecting it all together.
Love that. Thank you. Those are great words of advice. Regina Guerra, Be the Earth. I love it. 2027 coming to
2027.
a what near you? Not a compost is coming to you.
That's right.
I'd like to sign up. I'd like to get on the waiting list.
All right. Yes. I'll
Right
be in
on.
touch.
Thank you, Regina.
Okay.